So, and to focus on assessment now as one of the main processes of education. And once again, let's break down assessment into three. So far we've been breaking things down to 1, 2, 3s, okay? Let's break assessment down to three. And the first part of assessment is, let me just call it the actual assessment activity, okay? The actual assessment activity. What do I mean here? Imagine you are assessing children on the ability to sing the national anthem. How do you assess it? You ask them to sing, okay? So, for example, you can ask them to sing the national anthem. That is an assessment activity. If you are assessing children to see if they can jump over a hurdle, you actually go outside and observe, okay? So, you do an observation of the kids jumping over a hurdle. If you want to see if the children can find the square root of 16, what do? You give them a written test, and you know that is another way of assessing. So there are so many types of assessment activities, and I really want you teachers to have an appreciation of the validity of these types of assessment activities. Whether it's singing, it's observing, it's testing. A written exam is not the only thing that qualifies as an assessment, okay? Virtually every other thing that you do in order to be able to see performance and to give feedback qualifies as an assessment activity. So the actual assessment activity is the first part of assessment, okay? The second part of assessment, and how I'd really like you to think about assessment, is the act of record keeping when it comes to the assessment, okay? And with record keeping, once again, how do you keep the records of assessment? After you get these children doing the activity like a test, okay? If they've done a maybe midterm exam and you've marked it, what do you do after that? You normally record the marks. True or false? Yeah, true. So the act of record keeping can be maybe the way you keep marks. Let me just write that, marks, the way you keep marks of an exam. The way you record children maybe doing maybe a project, maybe they went to the market and everything, they typically can record it in something like a portfolio, okay, that's familiar to you also, etc. And the most common way of keeping records, which according to me is also the most powerful way of keeping records, is through things like rubrics, okay? So that is record keeping. Please do not confuse filling in a rubric with the assessment activity. Filling in the rubric is the record keeping, the act of record keeping. It is part of assessment, but it is not the actual assessment activity. Okay, I hope it's clear, because you can assess children, you can observe children, let me highlight them in yellow. You can observe children and then come and keep the record in a rubric, okay? You see, that's the actual assessment activity different from the act of keeping the record of assessment. Very important distinction to have. And finally, the third part of assessment is reporting. Okay, we do this assessment in order to give us things like end of term reports. Let me put this in red again, like the rest. Sorry, my rubber is, yeah. So for example, end term reports. Okay, right now you can even produce mid-term reports depending on the tool you're using and how easy it is. Okay, so that's what we mean by reporting. Because what is the point of the kids doing an assessment? What's the point of keeping that record? Eventually we need it to be able to produce a report. And a report, we can produce a report depending on what we want the people seeing the report to see. What I mean is, you can either say, let's show them open exam and end term exam only. Let's not show them mid-term, or let's show them the average of mid-term and end term, or let's show them end term only. That's what I mean by reporting. You see, the way reporting is different from assessment. You do not necessarily report on everything you assess. You do not necessarily keep a record of everything you assess. I hope you really can see the distinction. And that's me focusing you on just this act and part of assessment, for you to be able once again to use the language of the three parts of assessment. Okay, the actual assessment activity, the record keeping, and finally the reporting. If you can manage to see things this way, if you can manage to speak about assessment this way, then I think you are on course to have a very deep understanding of everything else that goes around the process of assessment.